The moment my father smirked and said, "She'll never win," I felt every eye in that courtroom turn toward me. He didn't even lower his voice. He wanted me to hear it. His attorney chuckled beside him. My younger brother leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. And for a second, I almost believed them. Almost. Then the judge looked at a sealed envelope in front of her and said something that changed everything. "Before we proceed," she announced, "the court has received additional evidence submitted under the instructions of the deceased." My father's smile disappeared, and 10 minutes later, my grandfather's face appeared on a courtroom screen. That was the moment the lies started falling apart. But to understand why that video destroyed my father's entire case, you need to know what happened long before we ever stepped into that courtroom. I'm Rebecca. I was 46 years old when my family decided I was no longer useful. Growing up, I was the invisible child. My younger brother Jason was the golden boy. And if Jason got a B, my parents celebrated. If they got straight A's, they asked why I didn't get extra credit. Yet if Jason forgot a responsibility, someone fixed it for him. As if I made a mistake, I heard about it for weeks. At first, I thought that was just how families worked. It wasn't. Looking back now, I can see the pattern clearly. My father adored Jason because Jason reminded him of himself. Confident, charismatic, good at making promises, not always good at keeping them. I was different. I was quieter, more practical, more interested in solving problems than impressing people. My grandfather noticed. His name was Walter. He was the only person in the family who saw me for who I was. While everyone praised Jason's potential, Grandpa paid attention to actions. And actions told a very different story. When Grandpa needed help after surgery, Jason always had an excuse. I drove him to appointments. When his roof started leaking, Jason promised to send someone. I climbed up there myself and found a contractor. When Grandpa's memory started slipping a little, I organized his medications, finances, and appointments. I never expected rewards. I just loved him. For years, that was enough. Then everything changed. Grandpa passed away 2 weeks after his 88th birthday. The loss hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't just my grandfather. He was my safe place. The one person who never made me feel small. At the funeral, my father cried harder than anyone, at least in public. Privately, he spent most of the reception talking about Grandpa's estate. That should have been my first warning. A month later, the family gathered for the reading of the will. I remember Jason walking in with a grin. I remember my father looking unusually relaxed. I remember thinking they seemed strangely confident. Then the attorney started reading. At first, everything sounded normal. Small gifts, charitable donations, personal belongings. Then he reached the section involving Grandpa's house and investment accounts. The room went silent. "Those assets shall be placed under the management and ownership of my granddaughter, Rebecca." I thought I misheard him. Jason certainly did. "What?" he blurted. The attorney repeated it. My father's face turned bright red. Jason looked like someone had punched him. The estate represented nearly $2 million. Not billionaire money, but enough to change lives. And Grandpa had left the majority of it to me. That's when the war began. For the next few weeks, my father called constantly. At first, he tried guilt. "Your brother has children. Family shares things." Your grandfather was confused. When guilt failed, he switched tactics. He demanded, accused, manipulated. He claimed Grandpa never intended the estate to go to me. I refused to hand anything over. Not because I wanted the money, because I knew exactly why Grandpa had made that choice. He had watched everything for years. He knew who showed up and who didn't. Then I received court papers. My father and Jason were contesting the will. According to their filing, Grandpa had been mentally incompetent. They claimed I had manipulated him. I stared at those accusations for almost an hour. My hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid, because I was hurt. After everything I had done for that man, they were trying to turn me into a thief. That was when I realized something important. This wasn't about grief. This was about greed. And they were willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. I hired an attorney. Her name was Sandra. The first thing she asked was simple. "Did your grandfather keep records?" I laughed. "Of everything." Grandpa documented his life obsessively. Calendars, notes, receipts, letters. Sandra smiled. "That may save us." At the time, I thought the case would be straightforward. I was wrong. The truth was much worse. As discovery began, strange details started appearing. My father claimed he had visited Grandpa weekly during the final years, but phone records showed otherwise. Jason testified that he handled Grandpa's finances. Bank statements suggested he barely knew where Grandpa banked. The stories kept changing. The facts didn't. That's when I started digging deeper. What I found shocked me. Several years earlier, Grandpa had loaned Jason nearly $200,000 to start a business. The money vanished. The business failed. Jason never repaid a cent. Even worse, Grandpa had written private notes describing repeated requests for additional money, requests he eventually refused. For the first time, I understood why Grandpa had become so protective of his finances. Someone had already tried to take advantage of him, and it wasn't me. Meanwhile, my father grew increasingly confident. The closer we got to trial, the more arrogant he became. He told relatives I would lose. He claimed I had manipulated an elderly man. Some family members believed him. Others stayed silent. The isolation was painful, but I kept moving forward because evidence doesn't care about popularity. Then everything changed again. 2 weeks before trial, Sandra called me. Her voice sounded different, excited. "Rebecca," she said, "I think your grandfather anticipated this." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "A package was delivered to the attorney handling the estate." "What package?" There was a pause. "You need to see it." Inside the package was a sealed letter. The instructions were specific. It could only be opened if someone challenged the will, and attached to the letter was a flash drive. Nobody knew what was on it, not even the estate attorney. The judge approved its admission pending review. My father's legal team immediately objected. That made me nervous, but it also made me curious. What had Grandpa prepared? Why had he expected this? I wouldn't learn the answer until trial. The courtroom was packed. Family members filled the benches. Friends from Grandpa's church attended. Neighbors appeared. People wanted answers. My father arrived looking confident. Jason looked even more confident. They believed they had already won. Their attorney painted a dramatic picture. According to him, I had isolated Grandpa, manipulated him, controlled his decisions. Listening to it felt surreal. They were describing a completely different person. When my turn came, I stayed calm. Sandra presented medical records proving Grandpa remained mentally competent. She showed appointment logs, emails, financial records, witness statements. One by one, the accusations began falling apart. Still, the case remained tense. Because legal battles are rarely simple. Then my father took the stand. That was his biggest mistake. Under questioning, he repeated the same story. Grandpa had been confused, influenced, unable to make sound decisions. He looked directly at the judge, then directly at me, and that's when he delivered the line I'll never forget. "She'll never win." Everyone knows my father wasn't thinking clearly. The confidence in his voice was unbelievable. He thought the case was over. He thought he had convinced everyone. Then the judge opened the sealed evidence package. The room became silent. The flash drive was connected to the courtroom system. And suddenly my grandfather appeared on the screen. He was sitting in his living room, wearing his favorite blue sweater, looking directly into the camera, looking directly at all of us. Even now I can hear his voice. "If you're watching this," he began, "someone is challenging my will." A murmur spread across the room. My father's face went pale. Grandpa continued, "I am recording this because I know exactly who will be unhappy with my decisions." The courtroom became completely still. Then he said something that changed everything. "My son and grandson believe inheritance is an entitlement. It is not." Jason stopped smiling. My father stared at the screen. Grandpa wasn't finished. He described years of events, specific dates, specific conversations, specific financial requests. He discussed the failed business loan, the repeated demands for money, the pressure he experienced. And then he looked directly into the camera again. "Rebecca never asked me for $1. I felt tears filling my eyes. Not once. The room was silent except for Grandpa's voice. "She showed up when nobody else did." He described hospital visits, repairs, appointments, holiday dinners, countless moments I had forgotten, moments he hadn't. Then came the final blow. Grandpa reached beside him and held up a notebook. "This contains records of every financial interaction involving my family during the last 10 years. Sandra nearly smiled. My father looked sick. Grandpa continued, "If this video is being shown, it means my wishes are under attack. Therefore, I authorize the release of all supporting documentation." The judge immediately reviewed the accompanying records. The evidence was devastating. Every claim my father made was contradicted. Every accusation collapsed. Every inconsistency became visible. What happened next shocked everyone. Under further questioning, Jason admitted portions of his testimony were inaccurate. Then more inaccuracies surfaced. Then more. The attorney who had seemed so confident that morning suddenly looked trapped. Because facts are stubborn things. And Grandpa had preserved every single one. By the end of the day, the courtroom felt completely different. My father no longer looked powerful. He looked exposed. For the first time in my life, I saw him without the mask. No charm, no control, no audience willing to believe him. Just consequences. The judge ruled in my favor. The challenge was dismissed. The will remained valid. And because of the evidence presented, my father and Jason were ordered to pay significant legal costs. The ruling was public, the humiliation was public, the truth was public. But strangely, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad, because none of this should have happened. Grandpa deserved to be remembered with love. Instead, greed had turned his memory into a battlefield. In the weeks that followed, relatives began reaching out. Some apologized. Some admitted they had believed the accusations. Others simply wanted to reconnect. The biggest surprise came from my aunt. She hugged me after one family gathering and whispered, "Your grandfather always knew who you were." That meant more to me than the court victory, more than the money, more than any legal document. Because for most of my life, I had felt invisible. And now the person who mattered most had made sure I would finally be seen. I eventually sold Grandpa's house. Not because I wanted to leave it behind, because I wanted to honor what it represented. Part of the estate funded college scholarships in his name. Part supported local senior programs. The rest gave me something I'd never truly had before. Freedom, not just financial freedom, emotional freedom, freedom from needing my father's approval, freedom from competing with my brother, freedom from carrying expectations that were never mine to carry. As for my father, our relationship never fully recovered. Some wounds don't. Jason reached out years later and apologized. Whether it came from regret or maturity, I honestly don't know. But I accepted it. Not for him. For myself. Because peace is lighter than resentment. Sometimes people ask whether winning the case felt satisfying. The answer is yes, but not for the reason they expect. The best part wasn't the inheritance. It wasn't the ruling. It wasn't watching the lies collapse. The best part was hearing my grandfather's voice one last time. Hearing him say what I had spent decades wondering, that he saw everything. The sacrifices, the loyalty, the quiet acts nobody else noticed. And in the end, that became the greatest gift he left me. Because life has a way of revealing the truth eventually. People can rewrite stories, they can spread lies, they can underestimate you, but character leaves a trail. And sooner or later, the evidence catches up. My father walked into that courtroom believing I would never win. What he didn't understand was that the case had never been about money. It was about truth. And when the truth finally started playing on that screen, there was nothing he could do to stop it.